I am sitting here with Tasha Alexander. She is a local author, and you are a historical mystery fiction writer. So where did it all begin for you?
Well, I think it began for me the way it begins for most writers, which is with reading. And from the time I was a tiny little kid reading, I couldn't get enough. My first memory, actually, is of realizing that I was further ahead of the page on the book that my mother was reading to me. And I thought, wait, you don't need a grown-up for this?
Right.
And the whole world opens up to you then.
And understand that was your family eating while you were reading under the dining room table?
Sometimes, but actually most of the time when I was under the dining room table, I was pretending it was a covered wagon and that I was Laura Ingalls exploring the American West.
Okay, so avid reader, and then when did that avid reading switch over to actual writing?
Well, fairly early. I wrote lots of, I think, you know, when you're a reader, the natural next step is to start writing, because writing is really the ultimate reading experience. The book ends exactly the way you want it to. So I would, when I was a kid, write little short stories, very bad, bind them with cardboard and yarn. But it was not until I was out of college and had worked a series of terrible jobs for years and years and years that I turned back to writing.
You called them soul-crushing jobs. Who hasn't had one of those?
I think we've all had them, and I had a number of them, and I was incredibly bad at every single one of them. I think that my employers were probably as happy for me to be a writer as I was to be a writer and no longer have the soul-crushing jobs. But for me, it really was, I had a real epiphany moment. I had always wanted to write. It just didn't seem like a practical way to earn a living.
Right. Who can make a living writing?
Exactly. You have rent, you have health insurance, you have all these things, hence the soul-crushing jobs. So one day, I was reading a mystery by Dorothy L. Sayers called Gaudy Night. And her character, Harriet Vane, is trying to decide whether or not to get married. And she's concerned, it's set in the 20s, Sayers was this Dante scholar at Oxford who wrote these phenomenal mysteries. And Harriet, as a woman in the 20s, is concerned that if she gets married, she's not going to be able to do what she wants to do. And I know it doesn't sound like it has to do with writing, but it really does. It has to do with anything that you want to do that you keep not doing. And it's very easy to not write. Easiest thing in the world to not write. You've got the job. You've got a baby. You've got your
You got TV shows to watch.
You've got a lot of TV shows to watch. And I kept doing that. I kept saying, well, I want to write, but, you know, I don't have time. I've got this, I've got that. And I was reading this passage in Gaudy Night where Harriet is saying to her friend, you know, if I get married, am I going to be able to do what I want? And her friend said, absolutely. Because when you actually know what it is you want to do, you will figure out a way to do it, no matter what your circumstances are. And that just really struck me, because I had spent the better part of a decade saying, I want to be a writer. But I wasn't writing anything.
And then it finally happened.
And so I thought, well, I have to either write something or stop saying I want to be a writer.
And how long did it take to write that first book?
Not very long. I was really like a woman possessed. And in fact, my son was 3.5 at the time. I had no babysitter. I was living in a garret apartment in New Haven, Connecticut, literally the top floor of this old Victorian house. It was the servants' quarters. And I just wrote whenever I could get a moment. And, you know, you've got a little kid, you know what that's like. You don't always get time.
That sounds like a story itself. In this apartment, you get a kid. And boy.
Yeah, so I sat down that next morning and started writing what became my first book. And when you really know what you want to do, you will figure out a way to do it.
I'm with Tasha Alexander. She is a historical mystery fiction writer. And this is the book we're talking about. This is your 9th book.
That's right.
Yeah, we talked about your first book, so obviously you've been writing for a while.
That's right.
9th book. This one is called The Counterfeit Heiress. It's part of the Lady Emily mystery series. So who are your favorite mystery writers, detectives?
Well, there are many, but my absolute favorite is Elizabeth Peters, who writes the Amelia Peabody series.
Okay.
Edwardian woman, starts in the Victorian age, kind of quickly goes to Edwardian, and she marries a very eccentric Egyptologist. And every season in Egypt, you know, there's another dig and another dead body. And they're just wonderfully witty books.
And you love this historical genre.
I do.
Are there many of you out there that are doing historical murder mysteries?
Absolutely are. Absolutely. I mean, Lauren Willig writes a wonderful series. Charles Finch, who's another Chicago author, writes a Victorian series, Deanna Rayburn. There are lots of us.
Okay, so you're not an odd duck out there.
No, there are lots of us who wish we were living in the 19th century.
Yeah, yeah. Agatha Christie, certainly like the queen of mystery writers. What's so great about her?
She's so consistently good. You know, I can remember the first time I read Christie. I had graduated from the children's room to the adult section of the library, and I found her book. She was one of the first mysteries that I read. And I just started at the beginning and went through systematically all of them. Her character development's great. Her stories are so good. The settings, you really feel like you're there in England.